Mr. Mercer and Mr. Perkins are not here. Ms. Belmetero, would you please begin with the opening statement? 1 minute.
Thank you for being here. I'm the Lone Ranger, so this is going to be a quick section here. I teach at Texas State University, and I'm running for State Board of Education, which is 13 counties, and they're responsible for the textbooks, curriculum, approval of charter schools, and teacher training, and it's an important board that is not paid. I've been teaching for 35 years at Texas State University. Before that, I was in the Peace Corps, teaching in one of the poorest countries in the world, Chad, for 2 years. I also served as the translator for Air Force grain flights to the Sahel during the drought. My goal on getting on the State Board of Education is to make sure that we actually teach real science, real history, and real math. That's pretty simple, you would think. But how many of you have heard about all the controversies at the State Board of Education? Every year we hear about another controversy, so I want to change that.
Right. We'll move on to the question. What is your position on Senate Bill 149 passed in the last legislative session, which amended the state's assessment graduation requirements?
The bill is really a stopgap measure to try to deal with the overemphasis on high-stakes testing. So they decided to look for alternative ways to test students with a board, and I think that we should stop having end of high school testing. I know students, and I know that at the end of the year, that's the time when they're really not ready to be tested. Teachers should be relied on to test our students during the courses, and if you pass the courses, you should be able to graduate from high school. They don't have an end of test, an end of your program for college, and they shouldn't have it for high school. I think that it's made teachers and students crazy having so much high-stakes testing. Also, that is typical of what they do. They make a mistake and then they go back to try to correct it. So the State Board of Education needs to take a leadership role and make sure that we have a good curriculum that teachers can actually teach. And we have to make sure that our textbooks are accurate and up to date. We cannot have the dumbed-down textbooks that they've been approving.
What criteria would you use to select textbooks? And you really have a minute and a half. Because you get to rebut yourself.
I'm rebutting myself. Okay, I was going for this shorter amount of time. We need to pick the best scholars, and we need to pick the best textbook companies. We have had a state board that wants to drag in politics to everything, not just history, but also to English studies and even to math, and certainly to science. We have big problems ahead of us. We have climate change that these kids are going to have to know how to deal with. So we have to be sure we're teaching them real science. That's pretty simple if you go to subject area experts and look at who has published what. And you make sure that those people aren't in the pay of the petroleum industry. Petroleum industry is very important, but we have to be shifting to new kinds of renewable energy. And we have to start teaching our kids all kinds of things like civics when they come in, and how to do practical skills. We have to look at vocational skills and really teach citizenship and participation. And we have to make our children love education again, instead of spending a third of their time studying for tests and having the teachers driven crazy by having to teach to the test. The State Board of Education could take a leadership role and explain to the legislators that that's what we need to do.
What are the duties of the State Board of Education, and what skills do you bring to the board to help fulfill these duties?
I already mentioned that they pick all of the textbooks, they pick all of the curriculum, they listen to citizen comments, they also manage a $23 billion permanent school fund, and they approve charter schools, they approve teacher training standards, And it's a hugely, hugely important invisible board that is controlling the future of our children. So we need to have people who really have a background. I've taught for 35 years, I've trained teachers, and I also worked in our public schools when our two daughters graduated from San Marcos High School. For the 16 years that they were there, I was volunteering every single year, and so I know what happens in the public schools. I'm going against a person who's been an incumbent now for 4 terms, and he has no experience with education. His daughters were educated in private schools. His passion, he says, is charter schools. There are some fine charter schools, but we have to put these charter schools under the same microscope that the public schools have been under, and we need to support our public schools because that's where most students go. Are there any questions from the audience for this candidate?
Please state your name.
Hi, Mark.
You have 30 seconds to ask your question.
My name is Mark Lowy, and I've participated as an opponent to Rebecca in many forums for the State Board of Education. Rebecca, you know that one thing that I advocate is to acquire low-cost textbooks so that children can keep their books permanently, especially in math and science, but also other fields. What are your views on that idea? And what do you think the State Board could do to acquire low-cost textbooks for children to keep?
I think that's a great idea. I've heard Mark mention this idea before, and I think the State Board of Education needs to get creative, because we could take I say we as if I'm already on the board, but we could take a leadership role in innovating and in recommending to the legislature how to spend their money in an effective way. Sometimes people say, oh, you can just go to electronic textbooks, but a lot of students don't have internet access at home, and a lot of them really could use those textbooks to study during the summer, and that would be with some subject areas also that don't change all that rapidly. So it would be a very useful idea.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
James Bryan Jr. I'm a certified teacher of high school biology and chemistry.
Thank you.
Former elected trustee at Walmart in San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District. My question simply is I'm livid on how the disability funds were cut for disabled students. And Ben Sargent has pictured the Texas legislature as a circus coming to town. So you're going to have your work cut out for you. So I would like to know which means, what would you do to reestablish those funds for the disabled kids in the state of Texas?
I would form coalitions with people who truly care about education and talk to people one by one and get people who have their own children with disabilities to come and speak to these legislators, because some of them, they do have a heart, but they're ignorant. And if you're not aware of what this is about, it's that the Texas legislature passed a law saying we don't have the 13% average that the United States had of students who have special needs. We only have 8.5%. And I personally know a teacher who helps, he's an assistant in a special ed class, and he's had to have his class increased from 40 students at workstations that they manage to 60. And he also has additional paperwork to do, and that is criminal. That is criminal.
We'll take one more question from the audience.
Again, my name is Arthur Taylor, and I am the Executive Director of Impact Charities Foundation here in San Marcos. Today, ma'am, I had several meetings with city leadership talking about at-risk, an outreach program for at-risk youth, soft skills program. You talked about certain educational programs in the school district. I want to know what your views are in implementing more Black history and American culture in the school system program.
That's one of the important areas that the State Board of Education has really fallen down with. They allowed textbooks to be passed that called slavery and slaves workers. They called the slave trade the triangular trade. Now granted, that was a euphemism that was used to describe slavery, but it doesn't tell the truth about our history. Also, in states that have implemented African American studies, Mexican American studies, they have shown that those students have much better graduation rates, much better grades, much better continuing on to some kind of advanced study or to universities, and that they graduate at higher rates. There's a distinct correlation between letting people learn their own histories. And I think this could be extended also to the Czech communities that we have, to the German communities. We need to have cultural studies courses that give people a sense of their heritage. And it isn't just, one size fits all. 30 seconds to close. This is my third time to run against Ken Mercer, and I am going to beat him this time because I am persistent and I am qualified. And I am getting out to all 13 counties, and I'm very encouraged with what I see out there. I've become a better candidate, but I know that I can do this job and that I can transform the face of education in Texas. Thank you. Go to vote, Rebecca.com.